This morning, the brand new jobs numbers came in. We smashed expectations and created 225,000 new jobs last month.
Very big numbers today. President Trump touting a better than expected jobs report, yielding, as he said, 225,000 new jobs. I think the expectation was about 158. Labor participation ticked up to its highest rate in more than 6 years. But perhaps more surprising is New York Times columnist Paul Krugman, who predicted a global recession under President Trump, now admitted in a piece that, yes, the economy is strong, writing, quote, "It is needed, a strong economy." It is indeed a strong economy, I should say. But if we ask what lies beneath that strength, the main answer is an explosion in the federal budget deficit, which exceeded $1 trillion last year. And the story of how that happened, he writes, has deeply disturbing implications for the future of U.S. politics. Joining me now is Andy Puzder, author of The Capitalist Comeback and former CEO of CKE Restaurants. Andy, good to see you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good to be here, Martha. Thank you.
So I would also remind everyone that on the night that President Trump won the election, Paul Krugman famously said that if you are asking when the markets will recover, the first pass answer is never. Never. He said that they would be devastated for years and years to come. And of course, since in the last 3 years, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 50%, Andy.
Yes, it is. Well, he's been the Chicken Little of economists ever since President Trump was elected, predicting the sky would fall. And it's really no surprise that he now tries to credit government spending for economic growth, because he's been known as the leading interpreter of John Maynard Keynes, the demand-side economist. Where the government spends more, you get economic growth. It's a terrible system. Supply-side economics is much better, what President Trump did with tax cuts, deregulation, and a focus on domestic energy. But you have to remember, during President Obama's term, the deficit went from about 11 trillion to 20 trillion. So it almost doubled. And we didn't get the kind of dynamic labor market or economic growth that we're seeing with President Trump. That's because President Trump's economic policies, a reversal of Obama's, a reversal of what Krugman wanted, again, with the tax cuts, deregulation, and a focus on domestic energy. That's what's really driving this economic growth. It's not what Krugman says. He's one economist who is very always confident and almost always wrong.
And I would also point out in that piece, he says that he thought that President Obama's stimulus was woefully weak, that it was not nearly large enough. He wanted the government to spend a lot more on that renewal project than it actually did. But he does bring up the issue of the deficits and says that if we continue at the rate we're at right now, in 10 years, the debt to GDP ratio would be at 98% of GDP, Andy. And I think that, you know, the deficit does concern a lot of people, even fiscal conservatives. Are we going to see anything done about that if there is a second term for President Trump?
Well, sure. Number one, it concerns me and it concerns the president. But we had to rebuild the military. We had, 5, 6 years under President Obama where the military was neglected. Our planes didn't fly. We didn't have proper protection for our troops. He had to rebuild the military. He did. It's been rebuilt. So that's an expense that's basically behind us. We need to maintain it, but the rebuild is done. And secondly, what we need to control is non-discretionary spending. We need to control the government programs where the costs go up no matter what the budget says, no matter what Congress or the president does. We need to revise those programs. That'll actually take some unity of action between Congress and the presidency. So I'm hopeful, if we can get Republicans in the House, and I think Nancy Pelosi's done a lot to really encourage me that could happen in this next election. If we can hang on to the Senate, we may be able to get something done with respect to the deficit in a second term. That's the time to deal with it. There's a lot less political risk. One
issue, as they get towards the budget discussions that I thought was interesting today is that the White House says that they want to increase AI spending and R&D funding of AI to nearly $2 billion from $973 million going up to 2022. What do you think about that investment, and what do you think is triggering that decision?
Well, I think we need to remain competitive. We need to remain competitive with China.
Yep.
We need to remain competitive with other nations. If we don't do that, we're going to pay a bigger price down the road. There are reasons for government to spend money, but there are also a lot of programs where we simply spend too much, we're not efficient, and they're kind of the third rail of politics, these government transfer programs, where you can't touch them. And I'm not saying we should reduce government benefits, but if we were more efficient about it, more practical, maybe something like the earned income tax credit to try and replace a lot of these programs, we could cut our spending. We need to focus on where we can cut, where we can reduce without hurting people. And I think we can do that.
Thank you, Andy. Always interesting to talk to you. Good to see
Thanks,
you tonight.
Martha. Good to be here.
So the prosecution is part